Ready to start. Okay, this is the Mr. Keep You Out of Jail School of Law. Howdy at a mental yield. This is the Mr. Keep You Out of Jail School of Law. St. Paul is awesome. We love your town, Minneapolis, as well. I hope you guys are doing well with the assault by the Frozen Water Gang, causing you guys immense problems. But let me just get a little started here. So this class, let me just start with some disclaimers. I'm an attorney, so of course I got to give you guys the disclaimers. Look, this is general advice. This is not to be mistaken for specific advice regarding your specific case. This is general advice about your rights, how to approach the system. I'm going to teach you how to approach the system, how to deal with the system. But if you have an actual case, you need an actual attorney to represent you and bring you through the process of litigation, whether it's criminal or civil. Okay, I am a lawyer. I am not your lawyer. This is a classroom type setting. I'm going to teach you. I'm not Mr. Keep You Out of Jail. I'm Professor Keep You Out of Jail for the next hour or so. But I am not your attorney. This is not an attorney-client relationship. Anything you say in here is not protected. Not that I would tell on you, but it's just the feds can get it if they want it, just so you know. And if you have a case, you need a lawyer. This is not law school in the sense that you know how to, litigate. This is law school in the sense that I'm teaching you the law. I'm teaching you how to approach the law. And I will teach you how to actually have intelligent conversations about your case. Okay. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about what we're doing here. I thought of the Mr. Keep You Out of Jail School of Law for 3 reasons. The first reason is I want people to have real understanding of the law. Most people know absolutely nothing about the law, but there's a lot of people that know a little bit about the law, but think they know a lot more about the law than they actually do, and their knowledge is kind of superficial. And honestly, that can be even more dangerous than just having no understanding of the law. Because if you have no understanding of the law, at least you're humble and you're not, going too crazy. Having a little understanding of the law and think you know better can be super dangerous. I want us to be able to handle things as effectively as possible and to be able to help those around us handle things as effectively as possible. Okay, the second reason I did this, I'll be honest, I'm raising money for my pro bono representation efforts. One of the great things about having some of the most affordable rates in New York City is that I get to represent a lot of people who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford private representation. But the problem with it is it doesn't leave me a lot of extra resources to do the kind of pro bono work that I'd like to do. Right now, I currently have one open pro bono case. I'm representing somebody who was defending our community here in Manhattan against an assault by the Frozen Water Gang. You know them as ICE. I try not to give them any legitimacy because they have none. But she was arrested for felony assault on an officer. She lost her educational grants. She lost her job. And, she's fighting a felony case because she knocked a traffic cone, one of those big round ones, on the ground, and it rolled into the leg of an officer. And she's facing a felony for that. So I thought it was important to give her proper representation pro bono, but I'm not going to lie, it's a difficult thing for me to do. I'd like to do more. Hopefully we can raise some money here to be able to take on more pro bono cases. And then the third thing I want to accomplish with this, I want to create a community where a justice-minded community. We are facing unprecedented threats to our constitutional rights. And people are just saying things, especially people in power. They're just sort of saying what the law is that has no connection to what the actual law is. And our populace at least needs to be educated about what our rights are, how we actually protect them with the system, what their limits are, and how we can fight for more. Okay, so I want you guys not just to be I want this to be more than a one-way street. I want to create a community of creative problem solvers. I won't be able to think of everything. I don't have everybody's experience. You guys have a diversity of experience. You're obviously very eager to learn about what's going on. So let's build on these things. Learn all you can from me, and then apply this to your life, and let's come up with solutions together. Okay. It's great to meet you guys. I'm Kate and Mazza. I live in New York City. I have 2 cats. They might join us at some point. And we'll go from there. Okay. Now, let's get into this law lesson. Does anybody, before I move forward, does anybody have any questions about what I was just talking about? Any thoughts, anything? You don't have to. I was just, I want to, we have a small class today, so I want to give people a chance to chime in if they want to. All right. Look, if you have something, put it in the chat. I'll try to address it. All right. So let's move on to the actual, what up, the ex-Terminator? I know this guy. He's one of the best family attorneys. If you're trying to break up or you're trying to get custody of your kids, hit up the ex-Terminator. He knows what he's doing. Is there a way to support me besides the classes? I don't know if this platform allows you to tip. I don't know if it does anything like that, but I will work on that. I appreciate that very, very much. I will I'll provide something in the chat after this this lesson. Thank you very much, Jenna JJJ. I appreciate that. And I'll be also keeping you guys updated about all the pro bono work that I am doing so that you guys can see what I'm doing. If I can get my clients to come on camera, I will. I'd love to. Yep, it's she got charged with assault for a traffic cone that hit an officer's leg. It is a mockery of justice. Okay. That's a good idea, Vlad. I appreciate that. I will consider that. You guys are very, very supportive, and I appreciate that. And by the way, this is why I created this community, because you guys are already giving me ideas. I am not a particular expert when it comes to social media or technology. I literally just joined all social media like 6 months ago, so I appreciate it. Yeah, listen, I got this case. It would be, definitely be helpful to to raise some funds to be able to do this case and more. If I need to get, expert witnesses, all kinds of things. I'd like to be able to give the top level of representation that I possibly can, especially for people who are arrested, protecting our community from a lawless law enforcement agency. Okay. Without further ado, let's get into this lesson plan, and then we'll talk after if we have some time. I'm liking this conversation. So let's start from the beginning, right? A police encounter, you always have to look at a police encounter as one particular thing. It is an evidence gathering operation. A cop is never interacting with you because they just want to shoot the shit and have a good time. That is not how this works. A cop talking to you means that they are trying to collect evidence of a crime so that they can make an arrest. Their job is not to pursue justice. Their job is not to, keep the peace. Their job is to make arrests. And arrests can be an arrest only have to be based on probable cause. We're going to get into that. In the street, your goal is not to win the interaction there in the street. You do not win anything in the street. You can't stop the cop from violating your rights. You can't stop the cop from searching you illegally. You can't stop them from arresting you illegally. All you can do is best prepare yourself for the eventual courtroom encounter. because that is what matters. I can't stop from a cop making you spend the night in central booking. Nobody can. The judges can't. A judge can't order police not to arrest you. They may be able to do it on a specific thing, but that's not the point. The point is we are dealing with these situations like an attorney. So if they end up in court, we have the best possible outcome. Okay, let's move on. Okay, let's talk about two legal standards that are going to be most... By the way, anyone just tell me, am I moving too fast? Do I need to slow down a bit? Is this pace okay? Let me know if I'm, if anyone's having issues. If you need me to go over something, sometimes I get a little ahead of myself. All right. And like I said, feel very, very comfortable participating. This is a two-way street. So here is the two legal standards that you have to understand, the two main ones that help you understand every police encounter. Okay, great, thank you. The first one is the two standards are as follows. There's reasonable suspicion, and then there's probable cause. So let's get into reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion means that they have specific, articulable facts that a crime has been committed or criminality is afoot, right? Maybe they got a call that people were fighting. Maybe they see a broken window and you happen to be standing nearby. It's an idea that things might be happening, but it's not specific enough. So it's more than just a hunch. It's not, I saw a guy and he's looking a little shady. It's, I saw a guy and he's carrying a baseball bat, but he doesn't have a ball and it's the middle of the night, right? Or I saw a guy running down the street and he wasn't wearing running clothes. It's not enough to arrest you, but it's enough to sort of stop and give you, have a conversation with you. It allows them to temporarily detain you. They can ask you some questions, and if they have any sort of articulable suspicion or reason to believe that there may be a risk of you having a weapon, they can give you a quick frisk. With reasonable suspicion, they can give you a frisk. This is how a lot of gun cases are made. And it's also how a lot of drug cases are beat. Because just because they can frisk you doesn't mean they can go in your pockets. They can only frisk you for weapons and things that feel like weapons. All right, let's move on to probable cause. So just a quick idea to help you understand reasonable suspicion real quick. Reasonable suspicion lets a cop pause your day, but it doesn't end your day, okay? Means he can get in your way for a couple of minutes, but he can't slap the cuffs on. All right, the next level is probable cause. Probable cause means that the cop can articulate facts, objective facts, that make them believe not only that a crime has occurred, but that you are the one that committed the crime. So we go back to that guy running. If he's running down the street wearing no jogging clothes and he just heard a window smash, that would be probable cause to put you in cuffs. Or if somebody told the police that you hit them, it doesn't have to be a very believable allegation, but that's Felix, by the way. He's making his appearance. So if they have to be able to say, here is an objective fact that makes me believe that a crime was committed and that you may have committed it. It doesn't have to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They don't have to prove anything. They just have to point to facts. Even if they're not very believable, even if they're not, they don't hold a ton of water. This is a very low standard, but it's a standard nonetheless, and it does matter. And a lot of cases hinge on whether probable cause existed at the time of arrest. Okay. Now that is a constitutional framework, right? That is how any criminal case in America works. They have to have reasonable suspicion to stop you and force you to stop, and then they have to have probable cause to put you in cuffs. Now here is, New York specifically has its own framework. It's called a DeBoer analysis, okay? So, and it's the DeBoer levels. There's 4 levels, all right? And it governs how police are supposed to interact with you. And so level 1 is a request for information. Any cop at any time doesn't require any suspicion. They can ask you non-pointed questions. Hey, how you doing today? Hey, you headed somewhere? What's going on? Anything that is not like accusing you of doing something, they're allowed to ask. You don't have to answer, and of course you should not answer. You don't have to stop. You don't have to anything. You're allowed to keep going, right? The second level is the common law right of inquiry. Now, let's say there's founded suspicion of criminality, right? It's like they have there's a lot of commotion going on. It's not quite reasonable suspicion, but it's a fact that they can point to that says someone might be committing a crime somewhere. It's very low, but they have to point to something, right? And they're allowed to ask pointed questions at this level. So they can say, were you at that store that just got broken into? What are you looking to do tonight? Where are you? Trying to get drugs? Like they can now ask pointed accusatory questions. Again, you don't answer because you never have to answer questions like that, ever, under any circumstance, and you shouldn't. But at this level, they are not allowed to detain you, right? The next level is a forcible stop. That means that's if there's that reasonable suspicion we spoke about. If they have reasonable suspicion, they can stop you. They can't arrest you, but they can stop you. They can ask questions and they can frisk you. Okay? That is that third level. They can interrupt your day. They can't end it. The fourth level is probable cause arrest. That means you're fully arrested. You're in custody, and they can search you completely because you're going into a secure facility. That's a search incident to arrest. So if you're driving a car, they can search your car to inventory it. If you have anything on your person, they can search your person. Now, I want to help you guys understand how this actually ties to real life, because I just gave you this whole framework, and you might get into a police encounter and think, he's sort of jumping from one level to the next. That's important to keep in mind, but also you're not going to, cops are going to do what they want to do. You may say, they may jump the thing and they may do what they're not supposed to do, but that is for your lawyer to bring back later in court and say, hey, this level of suspicion was only at a 2. Why did he jump to 4? Or why did he jump to 3? There shouldn't have been a stop and a frisk. There was no, the level of suspicion wasn't high enough. So that's how a lot of gun cases get thrown out, right? Level 1 is right of inquiry. At any time, any cop can ask you non-accusatory questions. They can say, how's your day going? Where are you headed? You coming from work? Nothing that's, hey, do you know this guy? Hey, stuff like that. They can ask. They can't stop you. They can't force you to answer it. They can't even tell you, don't leave. But they can ask you questions. It's called the normal, like anybody else, you can just walk up to the street and ask them questions. Cops can also do that. That's level 1. not a problem. It's not a problem to ask. So another related to this, right? A very important question to ask. Okay. Good question. Good question. Federal law enforcement, they operate under federal law. So what's important for federal law enforcement is the same thing above the last two levels, right? So to stop you, they have to have reasonable suspicion. To force you to stop and talk to them or deal with them and allow them to do an investigation, they have to have reasonable suspicion. To arrest you, they need probable cause. Same thing with feds, but New York State has that first two level frameworks that's a little different. That's all that's different. Okay. A very important question that goes along with this analysis, right? That very important question is, am I being detained, right? You always want to ask a cop this, and it's not like, so this is like, law has very few magic words, right? Usually it's all nonsense on TV, right? Like people also think like they need to read me my Miranda rights. Like, no, they don't need to read you your Miranda rights unless you're in custody, meaning you can't leave, and they're asking you questions. That's the only time they need you to read Miranda rights. So you always want to ask them, am I free to leave? Because if the answer is no, and probably the better way to ask is not, am I being detained? It's, can I leave? Or am I free to leave? It doesn't sound like you're being some sort of Weisenheimer or whatever. It's just a simple question. And the best, you want to make sure you say it into the body camera. You want it to be seen that you say, am I free to leave? Because if the answer is yes, then without hesitation, your job is to leave. If the answer is no, you're not free to leave, then your response is, if I'm not free to leave, then I guess that means I'm being detained. And if I'm being detained, I don't want to answer any questions unless I have an attorney present. This is very, very, very important, right? Because if you're being detained, that has significance, right? That means that they're saying that they have this reasonable suspicion that there's crime or criminality occurring, right? So this is one of the simplest situations for dealing with the law. You just need to say, am I free to leave? If you are not, if they say yes, you have to leave. Because if you don't leave and you start talking to them, everything's admissible. Right? Everything you say can be used against you and will be used against you. It won't be used to help you. And if they say you are being detained, then you should also have your antennas up, because that means they think you committed a crime, or they think that there's a chance that you're involved in a crime that's occurring. And that means that they're looking to make an arrest. So it's very important that you say, I'm not answering any questions unless I have an attorney, and shut the fuck up. Don't say don't say, can I call my mom? Don't say, can I do this? Just be quiet. Just say, I'm waiting. I'll if you want to take me for questioning, I'd like to have my attorney present. And that's it. And just say, I'm not looking to answer any questions. They may arrest you. They may make your life difficult. They might tear apart your car. They might do all kinds of things. It's all a tactic to get you to start talking. Don't fall for it. It's very important after they say you're being detained. I don't know how many, I go over this, and I kind of beat it to death because it's so important. Listen, Vlad, officer, I'm not discussing my day. Am I free to leave? Yes, that's that's a good question. I'm not going to pretend like that's not. But I also am somebody who advocates for being smart, right? Like I'm not one of these attorneys that likes to antagonize the police, right? Not because, if you want to fight for your rights, that's your business. I have no problem with that. Except as an attorney, I have a responsibility to you to try to keep you out of trouble. I don't want to see anybody get hurt. So my advice is always to be nuanced. Don't feel like it has to be a battle. It's not a battle. It's just anything that they tell you you have to do, whether it's right or wrong, you do it. But you don't waive any rights. You don't say, if they say, I'm going to search your car, you don't say, okay, you can search my car. You say, I'm not giving you permission, but I'm not resisting you in any way. That is that looks so good in court because it says you're just being a citizen who's, not waiving your rights. You're allowed to do that. And he's being a jerk because he's just pushing you around. But if you say, no, you can't search my fucking car, blah, 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 the judge will see that. And even if you're allowed to do it, you don't want that dynamic in the courtroom. You just don't want it. Head held high. You are just a person enforcing your own rights. Let's move on. I'm gonna get into the specifics, my specific advice in terms of practical behavior with the police in a minute. Let me get through the legal stuff so you guys understand. Are there any questions at this point? Are we still good? All right. Let's talk about how setting affects your rights, right? Because I'm going to have a full class on the Fourth Amendment, but I want to just give you a little bit of insight on the Fourth Amendment right now. So, and yes, the ex-terminator, you're 100% right. Less is always more. I'm going to give you a little insight into the Fourth Amendment. So the Fourth Amendment doesn't just mean one thing. There's no like black and white partition. It's more of shades of gray, right? So the Fourth Amendment is about protecting your privacy interests, right? You have the Constitution recognizes a privacy interest, and that privacy interest is more or less depending on the setting. Okay? And there's all these different things that affect the level of your privacy interest, but the setting is the most important element of how strong your, sorry about that. The lowest expectation of privacy is on foot out in public, right? You do have an expectation of, privacy in your person and your belongings, but it's especially if you are in specific kinds of public places, your expectation of privacy almost goes to nothing. So for instance, in the airport, you have essentially zero expectation of privacy in the airport. You could be patted down, searched, your bag searched on the randomly, just because they said so, right? And anything that's found during that search is going to be used against you because you don't have any expectation of privacy in an airport. A little bit more sense of privacy, but still very, very little privacy expectation is the subway, places like that, or like on public transportation. Technically, if a cop asks to search you, you're supposed to be able to say, I just want to leave the subway and I don't want to be searched, technically. But in reality, how the judges are actually going to rule on it. I have a client right now facing a gun charge because he followed somebody through an exit on the subway, and he had a gun on him, and the cop patted him down and found the gun. In my perfect world, my perfect constitutional analysis, I would say, that's a ticket. They should have asked him to give them his ID, and that's it. It shouldn't have been a pat down. There shouldn't have been any of that. And I'm going to fight for that, but how successful I can be in terms of fighting that it's questionable. I'm not gonna lie. But again, it's the same issue with, reasonable suspicion and probable cause. Okay, let's move on to car stops. So cars, there's an expectation of privacy in cars. There is, but it's not very strong. There's a lot you think, when you get pulled over, if they smell something, if they see something, if they, anything in plain view that they can say, leads them to believe that a crime's afoot, an open bottle of alcohol, or even like a cup that smells like alcohol, or something, that smells like weed, because they could say you're driving under the influence of weed. A gun, ammunition, anything that looks like powder. There's a lot of ways that cops beat that expectation of privacy you have in your car. You have even, and just to show you how it's a scale, the driver of their own car has the highest expectation of privacy. The passenger of a rental car has probably the least expectation of privacy. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but that's the scale we're working with here. Okay, and now let's get into home. By the way, also, car stops are probably the most litigated, when it comes down to this issue, if cops wrongfully searched, it almost certainly comes down to a car, because cars, there's a lot of gray area when it comes to cars. And sometimes prosecutors want to push the precedent as far as they can. Okay, now let's get into home encounters. And this has been especially important with dealing with the frozen water gang, ICE, those maniacs, right? They're showing up at houses a lot. Home is where you have the highest level of constitutional protection. Your home, in some states you're allowed to kill people that enter your home without your permission, right? New York is not one of those states. You have a duty. Crack your window, lick. Trying to understand. Foxy Black Wolf, happy to have you. I'm not sure what that means, but you can let me know. So in your home, right, you have the highest level of protection. The founding fathers, when they made the Fourth Amendment, they were by and large specifically talking about in your home. Yes. Got it, yes. Foxy Black Wolf is saying, just crack your window, lock your doors, and keep your seatbelts on to show you my ID and shut the fuck up. So, again, right? I'm going to get into the you know what? I'm going to come back to that, Foxy Black Wolf. I'm going to talk about the my practical considerations for actually dealing with a stop in a couple of minutes. So, let's get into homes, right? There is never, ever, under any circumstances, a reason to give a cop permission to go into your house. Unless there is somebody with a gun trying to kill you, I would not let the police in my house for any reason. One of the most common reasons people let cops in their house is because somebody in their family is having a psychiatric episode. And I am not going to pretend like you should. I mean, I'm not trying to guilt people. A lot of people I know have let cops into their house because somebody in their family was having a psychiatric episode, and that cop either beat them up, locked them up, or in the very worst of cases, killed them. And these people feel guilt for the rest of their life. Unless you think somebody is going to die or get seriously injured, do not let the police in your house. Because once they are in your house, all bets are off. Everything, I mean, technically, they're not supposed to look in things and go around. And you know, that is protected to an extent. But cops can come in your house and start looking at things, and they're trained to be like, oh, that's reasonable suspicion. That's reasonable suspicion. Sorry, folks. I'm in a little bit of a cold, so if I'm getting a little nasally here for a second, pardon me. So you never let cops in your house. If cops have a warrant or the ICE has a warrant, ask them to slide it under the door. If it is a warrant signed by an actual judge, not administrative law judge, not administrator, not agent, a judge, it will say judge honorable such and such will sign the warrant. Then, if you don't want your door kicked in, let them in because they're going to get in it one way or the other. But anything less than a signed judicial warrant, I don't care what they say. Somebody can run into your house away from ICE, and you can close the door, lock it, and force them to get a warrant. Now, if they get a warrant, fine. But a lot of times, especially with ICE, now this is some really good practical advice. Because ICE is so non-targeted right now, right? ICE used to go after specific people, right? Somebody got convicted of a felony and they go try to get that one person. Or somebody overstayed their visa and they try to go get that one person. But nowadays, they're doing this giant dragnet. So they're just trying to get people, right? So if you can get away from ICE even temporarily, for the most part, unless you are a target, like an actual target, they probably will just move on to the next person. So for instance, if ICE comes to your house looking to get you or someone in your family, and you just say, no, I'm not letting you in without a warrant. I don't care. And if they start to intimidate you, if they make you feel scared, call the police. Don't let the police in your house, but say there's people outside of my house and they're trying to intimidate me. Call the police on ICE. That doesn't mean you have to let the police in your house, and you do not let the police in your house. But this is a very important one because no matter how much we tell people, hey, you never have to let law enforcement in your house without a warrant, they still do it. Now, here's a trick that law enforcement uses to try to get in people's houses. They'll say, and I just actually dealt with this the other day. So they'll say something like, we have reason to believe that there's something wrong with your daughter or your grandma, somebody, your girlfriend in the house. We have to do a welfare check. Okay. First of all, absolutely not. Still need a warrant. You still need a warrant. And a lot of times what they do is they try to scare mothers or caretakers. They essentially say, if you don't let us check this out, we're going to get ACS down here. We're going to get Adult Protective Services down here. And we're going to get this kid or this person taken away because we suspect you're causing them a problem. So you can do one of two things. You can tell them, get fucked, which is a totally legitimate thing to say if somebody's trying to get in your house without a warrant, because then they're essentially, just random people harassing you. They're not allowed in. Or if you're looking to de-escalate for whatever reason, do not let them in your house, but the person they're looking for, have them come to the door. Have them come to the door. And All they can say is, I'm fine. And if they say, is there anything wrong? Is there anything wrong? Just say, I'm fine. That's all it takes. Close the door. I technically wouldn't even do that, but I understand people have kids, people have vulnerable people in their house, and they don't want to, risk these kinds of situations. Don't open the door. Just let them come to the window. Anything you can do to keep that barrier between you and the police. You want to maintain that barrier between you and the police, because once it's broken, once they have one foot in that door, it could be all over. And yes, that's a great, great job. Film people. Always film police. Always film ICE. Okay. Let's go on to the next thing. All right. Also, businesses, right? So administrators, people like, let's say, for instance, you have a restaurant. A health inspector can come into your business and inspect your business for the purposes of that administrative inspection, and they don't need a warrant. But law enforcement, like criminal law enforcement officers, cops, federal agents, they still need a warrant to come in if you want to deny them entry. Now, if it's a place of, public accommodation, they can come in, but you can also tell them that they're not allowed in. That is completely within your right if you are a business owner. But again, they can get their way into businesses a little more easily because the privacy interests are not as strong. But there's also, again, looking at this scale of privacy interests, you can't they can't just walk into the back of your business. They can walk into the public area of your business, but they can't just decide, oh, we're going to walk into the back without a warrant. So that's another example of that scale of privacy interests. Okay. Now let's get into the practical. Let's get into the practical here, okay? This is not law. This is not, you're not going to find this in a law book or a judicial decision. This is just my extensive experience personally dealing with police when I was very young and stupid, and as an attorney, seeing, the results of police encounters every day. So, number one, police can be dicks. They can be oppressors. They can be some of the worst people, but they're also people. So if you start out an interaction with them confrontational, it naturally will escalate if you run into the type of cop that wants to escalate. And you may be right. This happens a lot in the law, is that people are right, but they're still punished. Because here's the reality. If you're arrested, even if you are completely provably innocent, the process is a punishment. You have to go to court. You have to pay an attorney, or you have to deal with a public defender who you probably can't get on the phone. I'm not dissing public defenders. They have a lot of cases, and the system is not set up for them to give you individualized care, right? They're problem solvers. They're just meant to make the system function. As a private attorney, I can be a little bit more of a problem. I can create problems for the court, but you can't really do that as a public defender and not your life not be completely miserable. But the process is problematic. Sometimes you have to pay bail. So the overall, and this goes against my financial interest. This is me trying to help you as a person to avoid needing someone like me. Start out polite. Polite is good. You have to remember that you are not performing for that officer. You are performing for the judge, the prosecutor, and the jury that might see this video, right? This is not about the cop. This is not about sucking up to the cop. This is not about, this cop is stepping on my rights, so I'm going to listen, if you want to fight the cops, that's your business. I am not, and I'm not opposed to it. Fight the cops if you feel your rights are trampled on and that's how you want to assert your rights. I wouldn't suggest it because I don't want to see anybody go to jail. I think jail is hell and I don't think it's fit for people. But because I really do want to. Okay. What 2020 Pandemic King. What are we saying about? I really do want to know the language of this. I'd like to answer your question if Okay. Look. So polite. You're on camera. Your voice is being recorded. High def. They're looking at your face. You want to be polite. You want to say, "How you doing, officer? What's going on?" After I finish this lesson, I'll give you some good advice about the New York bar exam. No problem. Okay. The next important thing is you want to stay calm and compliant. If you're stopped in a car, you have to provide your ID, right? So provide it. Let's imagine we're being stopped in a car. This is what I would suggest, right? You stop. You turn the car, you put the car in park. If it's nighttime, turn the headlights on so they can see you coming in. You're not trying to hide anything, right? Because if you're smart, there is nothing in plain view in that car. Remember, if something is in plain view, they don't need a warrant. So hopefully anything that you wouldn't want a cop to see is in a glove box or in the trunk, which is even better. Okay. You're turning on the light. You're getting all your documents out so you don't have to fumble with them when they get there. You got your feet off the brake and the gas, and you have the window open. Some people might say just leave it open a crack. To me, it doesn't make a difference if it's open a crack or if it's open all the way. If they want to get in, they'll get in, okay? And, you're not going to beat them on the physical force game. I don't suggest anybody try to win with the police in the physical force realm. It's not a great way to do this. That's not the way. We roll down our windows. We say, "How's it going, officer? Is there a reason? How's it going? How are you? Here's this stuff." If they ask, "Why did I pull you over? Why did I pull you over?" Yes, Broskiego is definitely right. Your trunk, remember when I talked about that scale of privacy interests? The privacy interest in your trunk is more than the privacy interest in your glove box, right? Another thing, if you can put something in your trunk that is a locked box, now you have an even higher interest. Yes, Foxy Black Wolf, listen, like I said from the beginning, the cops violate rights. I can't stop them from violating rights, and you can't either. Rolling down your window just a crack is not going to protect you from them pulling you out of their car. It's just going to, if they want to do it, they're just going to break your window. And now, by doing stuff like that, right, whether we think that that's fair or not, rolling down your window just halfway is going to give them, it's a fact. Now you've given them an objective fact that they can look at. Good question, the Exterminator, about the engine compartment, right? So here's the thing. If something happens with your engine, right, you are creating a situation where they could have an innocent reason to look at your engine. Let's say they accuse you of having an aftermarket whatever the hell on your car. Now if they I concur, Foxy Black Wolf, but the issue is not about, we're not dealing with this from an emotional standpoint, even though I understand there is a 100% reason to have emotions. I am just saying that we need to win up here because we're not going to win like this. About the engine compartment, right? They may have a reason to get in your engine compartment. If they think there's something wrong with your vehicle and they go and they want to look under the hood, they may have a good reason for that they can go to the court and say, we had a good reason to go in that hood. It's harder for them to get in your trunk. But good question, nonetheless. And the next, you want to look calm, right? Because one of the most common reasons that cops use to escalate an encounter into an investigation is they say they were overly nervous, right? Overly nervous sounds like bullshit. And it is 90% of the time, but it is something that judges are amenable to. Judges, like if they see you on camera going, nervous, a judge might say, you know what? Subjectively, if I was that cop, I would think that something was up. They're giving all the signs. So if you're overly animated, you want to be smooth, calm, confident. I understand that, it's not easy. What I'm saying is not like, you can easily just turn it on, but we have to try our best. We don't live in the world of best case scenarios. We live in the world of what actually is, and when reality meets the law, it can collide in terrible ways. So I need to give you, yes, furtive movements is a very common tactic. So if you're kind of going like this, you're reaching for something down here, or you're going like this. These are all things that give cops justification because they are objective facts, right? That they can use against you. You don't want to give them any objective facts, right? So you being calm, right, and saying, officer, I am not, I'm willing to, I will not resist any commands, but I'm not waiving any of my rights. And, I'm not giving you the right to search my vehicle, and I'm not looking to answer any questions. So I'm not waiving my right to be silent. I'm not waiving my right to an attorney, and I'm not waiving my right to not be searched, right? So you may not search me. I'm not answering questions, but you tell me what you want to do, what you need me to do, and I will do it. If they say, I need you to give me permission. No, officer, that's not a lawful command. I am not giving you permission, but if you order me out of this vehicle, you are allowed to do that, right? That kind of puts the cops on notice that you know your rights and you're not worried. So they know that search is going to be hard to justify. So it might, in a lot of cases, that's how you protect yourself from getting, searched in the first place. You're calm, you do not waive any rights, and you affirmatively assert those rights. And then you simply say, and then you're compliant. So I'm not giving you what's in my head. I'm not answering questions. If you want to ask questions, I want a lawyer. If you want to search, I'm not giving you permission, but I won't get in your way. Right? And that's it. Look, they may still, after you do everything right, they may still search you and ruin your day and arrest you. But then You have the toolbox in court. If I have a client that this happens to, I go, yes, not only are we going to get this dismissed, but we're going to sue, right? And so let's talk about that now. False arrest, right? Thank you guys so much, by the way. I appreciate it. I'm very happy you guys are enjoying it. I want to keep doing this. I want to keep building this community. I'm excited. So let's talk about false arrest, and then we'll get into some questions, okay? Because false arrest is not what you think it is, okay? Just because your case got dismissed, that doesn't equal. So let's define our terms. When I say false arrest, I mean that you have a civil claim against the police for a false arrest, okay? A civil claim, I'm glad you guys are learning. This is excellent. This is exactly what I did this for. Okay. A civil claim is very different from the common understanding of false arrest. Most people would think if I get arrested and I'm innocent, that's false arrest. No, that's not false arrest. If I get arrested and I'm found innocent and I'm found not guilty, that's got to be false arrest. No, that's not what false arrest is. So false arrest is essentially an arrest without probable cause, right? You were arrested, taken into custody, and the police officer who did so did not have probable cause to do that. So remember, we spoke about, let's rewind and talk about what it is again. Objective, reasonable facts suggesting that that a crime was committed and that you committed it. Right? Not just that the crime was committed, but that you committed it. Okay? Let's talk about, so what this means in reality, right? So this means a lot of things to us, but let's talk about what it means in reality. So, if there's a complaining witness, if somebody says that you hit them, even if it's nonsense, even if the cops have reason to believe that they're lying, the courts will almost always decide that there was probable cause. They'll almost always. So the most common situation I see is assault 3. Somebody says that, their boyfriend or their girlfriend hit them. It was not real. It was an argument, and they got the person arrested, and then they pulled back the story, and the case is dismissed. People always want to know, can I get that, right? No. Mistaken identity. That's a good one. Yes, if the cops, I actually have a false arrest case right now where I have a guy who was arrested on an armed robbery, spent 3 months in jail, only for them to find out that it was a different person with the same name. And they were like completely different ages. So crazy. Arrested based on, and then they find there's no arrest warrant in the court file. See, that's a tricky one, actually, because it's not about the reality. It's about what the cop knew at the time. So if the cop made up the fact that there's an arrest warrant, then no. But if there was one on his computer or her computer connected to you, then you don't have a claim for false arrest. But if there was a warrant that popped up for somebody else and they mistook you for that person, then we're talking about a false arrest claim, right? One of the cases you want to look for when it comes to false arrest are cases where like gun or drug possession, let's say, right? Where the search that uncovered that drug or those guns was not based on was an illegal search, right? Because if the search was illegal, they couldn't even get to the next point where you were supposed to be arrested, right? And that it had to have been illegal because of that officer, right? If you were arrested and then released without speaking to sometimes I hear stories of people, they got arrested and then they're just sort of let out the back. That is almost certainly a false arrest. And then you also want to look at police initiated arrest. So the cops, they weren't acting on anyone. They just decided to, you prove false arrest basically through the cop's own testimony, right? What was the basis for them arresting you? And what does the body cam say, right? That's how we do it. But, and in reality too, if you haven't been incarcerated for more than 6 hours, you might have a claim, but the court will consider it de minimis and probably not give you any actual money. So it's really, if you were arrested, and now that we understand what probable cause is, yes, 100%. If there is probable cause and you're arrested, no matter how weak that probable cause is, it's not false arrest in terms of a civil claim. Yes, you're exactly right, Jessica HCKM. Civil rights violence and constitutional no immunity. Yes, that goes into qualified immunity. We do not have time to get into that right now, but that is a very good point, and we can definitely get into that later. 100%, I will bring that up in another class. Okay, this is my last little part of the lesson. Then I'm going to give you guys a quick closing message, and then you can answer some questions before we leave. So, if you believe that you've been subject to a false arrest, or somebody you know was subject to a false arrest, this is what you should do. And remember, false arrest is arrest plus no probable cause plus more than 6 hours in jail. Let's just put it that way. Okay? This is what you do. You or that person write everything down immediately. How did it go? Exactly, from beginning to end, as soon as you're out. Any text, photos, videos of the incident, make sure you preserve them. Do not speak about the incident online before you speak to an attorney, because anything you say online now becomes part of the official record. Anything that you say ever can always be used against you in any criminal or civil proceeding, right? What other people say about you can almost never be used against you. But what you say about you can always be. So if you want someone to talk about it, have somebody else talk about it. Don't you talk about it, because if you talk about it, now you've just created a record and you've locked yourself into this story, and that may not be the best decision, okay? And remember, and call an attorney before you talk to any officials, any CCRB. Call an attorney right away. And the FOIA, yes, of course, but your attorney can get that FOIA, and they can act very quickly if you call them immediately. And also know that in New York State, you technically have to file a notice of claim within 90 days from the incident. So with false arrest, it's really 90 days after the case is dismissed. That is, technically, there are ways around it, up to a year and 90 days. A lot of times you can still bring the case, or up to 3 years for certain federal claims. But the best practice is, as soon as you believe you've been subject to false arrest, as soon as you are free, preserve everything, write everything down, talk to a lawyer right away. Don't talk to the internet, and don't talk to anyone official. Okay. I want to just close this by saying, guys, remember, we are out here to advocate for ourselves and advocate for other people. We're trying to keep people out of the system, because once you're in the system, that's when the nightmare begins. I'm an attorney. I spend all day trying to help people out of the system, but the system is sticky. So if you can avoid it, unless it is something that you need to do from the bottom of your heart for to feel good about yourself, do not fight with the police. Do not argue with the police. Survive the police and then organize with your communities to change the police. You on the spot are not going to beat the cops in a game of force. You need to know that right now. You will not beat the cops in a game of force. They have more guns, they have more guys. But you can win in the court of law if you do this smart. Remember the stuff I told you? By the way, guys, I'm working on putting the lesson that I gave you today into some sort of format, some written format that I can share with you guys. Look forward to that. Yeah. By the way, so I appreciate that, everyone. Exterminator, Foxy Black, Elemental Yield. Guys, are there any questions, any burning questions that I can answer before we close down today? The pen, yes, the pen is mightier than the sword, definitely. Especially when you're by yourself. Eve Frankenstein, thank you so much. I am very happy to do it. And I hope that we can continue this. I hope this grows. I hope this is a way that I can finance some very important litigation and protection. I have high hopes. You guys in my community, has been so great so far. And you guys are like the vanguard of this community. You guys are at the very bleeding edge. And I love having you guys. It's been an absolute freaking pleasure. If I bike and use public transportation, if a cop asks me for ID, do I show them? I would ask them, what reason do you suspect me of a crime? If they suspect you of a crime, have them answer the crime, right? Can ICE have them, but if they can, then you want to show them your ID, because if you don't show them your ID and they do suspect you of a crime, they can take you in to identify you. But they have to suspect you of a crime.